Okay, so this week we are in the second part of a series called It's Complicated. It's complicated. We're talking about relationships because, well, they're a little bit complicated. And even if you are not in a relationship and have no plans of ever being in a relationship, the principles that we're talking about over the course of the next few weeks really can be applied to so many other relationships in life. But you might have to do some translating for your situation. So we're gonna review in just a minute, but I hope that if you were here last week, I hope that what we talked about with desires, expectations, I hope that it prompts some interesting conversations. I've had a lot of interesting conversations over the last couple days, and hopefully you have too. Hopefully not too many arguments at home, but hopefully this has been helpful for you. So here's where we started last week to review a little bit. And also, I think to make an important clarification. What we asked, the question that we started with was, when a romantic relationship is working, what is it that's working? What have they figured out? What do they know? You might remember my little friends Romeo and Juliet, those two little figures, right? When a relationship is just going super well all the time, what is it? Did they just find the right one? Do they have some magic formula? Do they have chemistry? Like, how does this work, right? The metaphor, the illustration that I showed you was one with these boxes. Now, I didn't make this up. I'm not that smart. But for me, this has been really helpful, understanding it this way. Before we ever go into a relationship, we have this box of what we might call desires, right? These are the things that we want. In a romantic relationship, it's the things we want in somebody out there someday, right? It's our hopes, our dreams, the things that we're searching for. And so maybe for you, it's the idea of like having a baby or having someone to raise a family with, or having multiple children, or maybe it's, having someone at home that's gonna help you clean the house, right? Or someone that's gonna clean the house for you, or someone you're gonna be with that's gonna hire a cleaning service, whatever. These are not right or wrong. They just are. They're just desires. And maybe you got them from what you witnessed from your parents, and it's what you want to see. Maybe you got your desires from what you witnessed from your parents, and it's what you don't want to see. Maybe it's what you saw in Disney movies, whatever. It's just this idea of what you want, right? Maybe it's this idea that, you're gonna be with someone who's gonna travel the world with you, or someone that's gonna help you, with laundry one day, or maybe someone that's just gonna make you feel special, right? By like leaving little notes around the house. There are dreams, our hopes, our desires, right? And so then we take our desires and we hit the road. And we go off to school, high school, college, work. We're looking around, checking people out. Is that the one? Is this the one? Right? And then eventually you find someone. You're like, okay, I think I found my match. And if that happened to you, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's like, I hope and dream of finding something in someone, and boom, there it is. They're doing it. Desire fulfilled, right? And then naturally, you want to do what they want. And it's this amazing cycle of desire. These happy couples, or couples in a honeymoon stage, right? Sometimes that's what we call it. They're in this cycle of desire, and it's a powerful thing. It's amazing. They're in love, head over heels, right? And if you can stay here and take this way of thinking into a long-term relationship, it really is an amazing thing, living out of desire. But often there's a shift that happens. We go from having dreams about being with someone, somewhere, someday, what that relationship could be, what I want it to be, what I hope for it to be, to what I expect. Our desires can pretty quickly become expectations, where it's like, well, I was dreaming of starting a family with someone and having kids, and what do you mean? What do you mean you're not ready to have kids yet? What do you mean you want to have 2 kids and not 6 kids, right? It goes from what I hope for to what I expect from you, right? It goes from dreaming of one day traveling the world to like, it's about time. It's about time we went on vacation. All my other friends are. It goes from like, maybe one day I'll have a home and we'll clean it and take care of it together to like, really? I gotta come home again to a dirty house? And what we dreamed of ideally finding in someone somewhere one day becomes what I expect from you. And the problem with expectations is that they are either met or they result in debt. You owe me. You were supposed to. We agreed to this. You said you would, and now you owe me. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to have expectations, but feelings don't follow expectations. There's a ceiling on an expectation, because when an expectation is met, you're simply doing what you're supposed to do, right? Congratulations, you didn't fail. You finally took us on vacation. And so really nobody wins, because if I have expectations of my significant other, I'm never grateful, right? Feelings of gratitude, appreciation, value, all the ingredients of intimacy, they're in the desire box. Wow, like what they're doing makes me feel valuable, makes me feel appreciated. But when it's in the expectation box, I don't feel valued or appreciated or known or seen. I just feel like, okay, good, they're finally carrying their weight. They're finally carrying their weight. And I'm not saying it's wrong to have expectations. I'm saying when something becomes an expectation, it loses the ability to contribute to the feelings of intimacy and closeness and connection in the relationship. We enter into a debt-debtor relationship. And so the question was, well, what do we do, right? Are we just stuck here? Is there a way to get desires back into the desires box? What we talked about was these words from Jesus. Right? These were the marching orders to Jesus's earliest followers. This was the one thing that if you forget everything else, don't forget this. He called it the new command, right? You remember this. He said everyone would know you by this. And this is where we were last week. We really just scratched the surface. But he said, okay, here, you want to know how to treat one another, especially in the context of relationships where you're with each other all the time. He says, as I have loved you, like the love you've just seen from me, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. He's saying, you want to follow me? You talk about following Jesus? Follow my lead. You want to see what love looks like? Watch what I do. And then we talked about really what that looked like and how a huge part of that is choosing to not carry debt. We looked at a passage in a letter written to a church that said that basically it was written by the Apostle Paul explaining what Jesus did for us. He's like, basically it's like he took the record of your debt, of everything that you did wrong, past, present, future, all of your shortcomings. He took the record of your debt and he nailed it to the cross. Like got rid of it, done. And so if you want to love like he loves you, you choose not to carry debt. Choose not to carry debt, which means drop the expectations. In fact, where we landed, what we said is really what's working when it's working is this idea of like happy couples, Romeo and Juliet. Like these people, they give everything and they expect nothing. They give everything and they choose, they refuse to carry a record of debt. There's an important clarification we have to have here, right? We have to make here. When we say they choose not to have expectations, it doesn't mean that they don't have desires. They still do have desires. And they, in a healthy relationship, communicate those desires. You should talk about it. You should go to counseling for your desire. You should share, like we're not supposed to be robots that just don't care about everything and never want anything. Right? But we should communicate these things. Now, here's the difference. When a desire is unfulfilled, I'm disappointed. I'm sad, right? It's what I wanted and I didn't get what I want. But when an expectation is not met, I'm mad. Right? There's a difference between disappointment and debt. You can be disappointed that you're not getting what you want, but this over time ends up becoming this root of bitterness. Like you're never measuring up to what I thought you were gonna be for what you agreed, for what you were supposed to be for me. And here's what happens, right? If eventually you do end up getting what you want and it stayed a desire, when it happens, there's a feeling of gratitude. Like this is what I always wanted, and you feel grateful. If it happens after being an expectation, well, it's about time. Finally, all this time, and you're finally doing what you were supposed to. Really, on the outside, there's not much different going on, but on the inside, it is radically different. A desire and an expectation. So they give everything, and they expect nothing. It's pretty radical. It's pretty extreme. So maybe you heard that last week, right? Gave you a little challenge. I said, maybe do this for 1 week. And then, if you didn't want that much homework, maybe do for 1 day. And if you didn't want that much homework, then maybe just ask one question. The question is, what do they owe me? What do they owe me? So maybe you tried it, right? Maybe you tried it. For me, this whole idea of giving everything, I need handles. What does that mean? Give everything. Do you want me to get my baseball card collection? Does that mean I don't watch sports anymore and we only watch home makeover shows? Do we eat what you want for dinner every night? What does this look like? I need giving everything, love as I have loved. I need something a little bit more concrete. And the Apostle Paul, the guy I mentioned earlier, one of the early followers of Jesus, he writes the same thing, but he writes it in a different way using different words. It's this idea of loving as I have loved you, like Jesus said, but he's doing it in the context, he's explaining it in the context of a household. And here's how he says it. He says, you ready? This is how you do it. This is the concrete version. Submit to one another. That's it. Submit. Which is not really all that hot, probably that's not something that gets you super excited. It's the idea of taking their desires and putting them before your desires. They are now the priority. When you submit, you're under the will, the desires of someone else. But that's not really all that appealing, think about how many love songs there are. There are no submission songs. You say, I love you. You don't say, I submit to you. We fell in love. We fell into submission. Or maybe you did. It's not really that exciting, but here's the idea. Really deep down within us, there is a desire to give ourselves to something or to someone. And when you give yourself, say, I will be your champion, and find in return that they are giving themselves to you, that's the recipe for deep connection, for intimacy. Those are the relationships we dream of. In fact, if you read this, submit to one another, it's so jarring that you might not even realize that it doesn't make too much sense, right? The word submit, it implies rank. So it's employees submit to your boss, kids submit to your parents, submit to one another. It doesn't quite work that well. It's like saying both of you go second. But it's this idea of me being completely invested in your desires and you being completely invested in my desires. So we go from mutual compromise. Remember last week we talked about the mortgage, like, all right, you hold up your end of the deal and I'll hold up my end of the deal. That's mutual compromise. It's a contractual agreement. So this idea of like me on my pursuit of happiness and what I want in a relationship, and I'll just keep giving you what you want so you don't get in the way of what I'm going after here. And hopefully I won't get in the way of what you're going after. I'll give a little bit to you as long as you give a little bit to me, right? Mutual compromise. You let me do this, I'll let you do that, fine. To mutual submission. Like I am all in for you and you're all in for me. It's not 50-50, it's 100-100. That's the kind of relationship that we dream of. That's the kind of relationship we want to be in. That's the picture of real, deep connection. And so maybe you hear that and you're like, okay, all right, got it, right? I'm doing it. I'm gonna love like Jesus. As Jesus has loved me, that's how I'm gonna love. You know, this whole idea of submission, I'm gonna live for their desires, right? I'm going for it. So the love I have seen in Jesus, right? The way he forgave, the way he cared, the way he was compassionate, like the love I have seen from him, that's what I'm gonna go like try and show in my relationship, if you're in a relationship, right? So you try it, okay? Maybe right after this, you tried. Or maybe you tried last week. You get in the car, you know, and it's like, where do you want to go for lunch? Where do you want to go for lunch? You know, and then you go home and you're watching what they want to watch. And it's going well. It's like, all right, God, we're kind of getting this a little bit, right? And then you go out with your friends and maybe like she brings up the thing she like said she wasn't going to bring up anymore. And it's like, ooh, right in front of our friends? Okay. You know, or maybe he does the thing he said he wasn't gonna do anymore. Okay. But then you get back to it, you know, and the next day is great. You know, you make coffee for each other. And you go, but then it gets a little bit harder, right? Like you see they put the cereal box in again, even though it's empty, you're right? Or they left their underwear on the floor. Or so who turned the heat up to 72 degrees, you know? And over time, it gets old. It gets old, especially if it's like we're, you know, you're giving a little and they're giving a little and you're giving a little and then it's like, hello. And then you're like, oh, let me try again, right? Right, and then it's like, oh, they didn't notice. She didn't care, right? And that's when you're like, I'm done. We do have a capacity. Like we do eventually run out of love to give. Or we could say that love is hard to initiate. It's hard to just muster up love within you. And so you run out if they're not reciprocating. That's where it becomes a problem. And now think about this. Like for Jesus to say, love as I have loved you, think about that, right? We hear that, and maybe you've been in church for a while, you hear that, and it's like, yep, cool. You know, I know that one. As I have loved you. Think about this. Imagine if like Derek Jeter. Anybody know Derek Jeter? Okay, respect. He's been gone for a little while, fantastic. Imagine he was good, right? This is a few years ago, and he like hits a home run. Playing baseball, hits a home run, walks out of the batter's box, goes up to you with his bat and goes, as I have hit the ball, so you hit the ball. And walks away. You'd be like, oh, wait a minute. You're the guy that does this. This is your thing. This is Jesus, right? This was his thing. He loved to a crazy extent. It was a ridiculous standard. My son is having trouble wrapping his mind around this. He's 5 years old. He was in his group a few weeks ago, and his teacher said, Jesus loves everyone. He's 5 years old. And he raised his hand and he said, he doesn't have all his facts straight. He's like, I don't think Jesus loved those guys that nailed him to the wall and made him dead. And so we like talked about it later on. But really, the idea is like, he wasn't happy about that. It wasn't a wall one, but he wasn't happy about it, but he still did. He still did genuinely care about them. That's crazy. That is a crazy standard of love for people. And so if you feel like that is a hard standard to reach, you probably should. You probably should. So what do? Right? Just try our best, knuckle down, white knuckle it. When Jesus says, as I have loved you, often we hear this as him saying, with the love you have seen from me, like love with the love you have seen from me, which is true. He does show us a standard. But the people that he's sitting with, he's saying, love as I have loved you. Like Matthew, you remember one of his followers. You remember how like you abandoned your family, turned your back on your people, how you cheated people, robbed people, how no one wanted to talk to you, how they spat at you, and I like stepped in and said, no, you're with me now. Remember that? I want you to love that way. And I don't know, I wasn't there, but maybe he went around and did that. He's not just saying the love you have seen from me. He's saying the love you have felt from me. Love with that love. He's saying take the love like that's vertical between you and me and send it horizontal. He's not saying, and this is crazy, he's not saying as I have loved you, so you love me. He's saying as I have loved you, go love other people. Why? Why? Because love is hard to initiate, but it is easy to reciprocate. And you know this, right? Like it is so much easier to love someone back. In fact, we can receive love from one party and pass it on to another party. And we may not call it that, but it's actually like love being transferred. Imagine you have a job and you go to work and you're at work and your boss is like, oh, you're just the best. You're the best employee I've ever had. You're fantastic. You're killing it, great reviews. Or you're the boss and your employees are like, oh my goodness, you're just the best. You're amazing. You're fantastic. Then you're walking down the street and people see you and they're like, you look good today, right? And then you get a phone call from an old friend that's like, I miss you. You're the best. My life is nothing without you. And you're just feeling like, wow, I'm so great. Like you really feel loved. To go back to the little cup illustration, it's like your cup has been filled. A third party has filled the cup. If you go home and your home situation, whatever that looks like, whether it's a roommate or a spouse or kids or whatever, and they're being difficult, it is so much easier to love them when you come home with a full cup. Because love can be passed on. It's like it's transferable. And the reverse is also true. If you go to work and your boss is like, hey, you stink. You're hanging on by a wing and a prayer, right? Then your friend calls you and says, my life was horrible when we were friends. And that stranger on the street says, you look like you just rolled out of bed. And then you go home and you're depleted, which is language we use. And then there's difficulty at home. How much harder is it to handle that? Because it's like we've been emptied out. In fact, the Apostle Paul says the same exact thing that Jesus says, but he uses different words. Same concept. He said, submit to one another, not out of like respect for them, not because they deserve it, not because they're fantastic. He says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Reverence, not like, ooh, reverence, but reverence like awe, like in response to him. It's the same thing. In fact, we could use some blue colors here, right? Same verse, two different ways. Submit to one another. Love one another. Out of reverence for Christ as I have loved you. There is a source that we are passing on. It's not because they deserve it. It's because it's being introduced from a third party. This is why, maybe this is a little bit too like religious for you, right? Maybe you don't believe this or you're just asking questions, and that's totally fine, right? But this is why we go back to Jesus over and over and over and over again. Why we talk about like how far he went to demonstrate his love for you. Why we bring it up, why we sing about it. Because it's from that like vertical love that we're able to love horizontally. Otherwise, we just have what we can give, right? And so if you're not quite ready to like buy into Jesus, this principle still remains true for you. If you're with somebody in a relationship and you just have nothing left from them, really, you can just go call your mother or call someone who loves you or call someone to go spend some time, even just think about someone that helps you to feel valued, and you'll see you'll have love to give. In other words, the implication here is not that you have to always just knuckle down and try harder. The implication is that sometimes you need to go find love to give. The problem, though, is that with other people, if you're finding from them, the limitations are so severe. And what if your mom decides she doesn't like you anymore? Or what if your friends aren't there for you? We believe there is a source that literally loves you beyond what you can comprehend. This is what Jesus meant when he described himself as living water, and he said, like, from you will come fountains of living, like from me to other people, to you and out to other people. Love is hard to initiate, but it's easy to reciprocate. And this works. This works. I've seen it. I've seen it in my own relationship with my wife, Allie. Like, there are times where we're having an argument. It's just not going super well, and we'll take like a minute to go take a breath, and she'll come back and she's different. She's different. She's in a different state of mind. She has a different perspective. And it's not like she's going away and having some, magic or voodoo or anything. She's like going away and putting herself in the right frame of mind. And like what I do, though I don't do it as well or as often, but when I have enough sense to walk away and do the same thing, I have to like teach this to myself, like preach it to myself. And remind myself that, like no matter whether I'm right or wrong, like this is not going to change what I'm worth. This is not going to change how God feels about me. In fact, like there's even a promise that even if I'm being totally wronged right now, even if I'm totally in the right, that I can grow through this, that God will use this for good. And I can go back into the situation with a different perspective, with a cup that has more to give. But if you're relying completely on what the other person will do for you, you'll run out. You'll run out. Love that is seen, like when you see the standard of how Jesus loved people, that will inspire you. But love that you have felt for yourself, that will transform you. That will give you the ability to love people that deserve none of your love. We'll wrap up with this. I'm going to ask the band to come up here. But here's the picture that like works for me, right? If for me, in my relationship, my wife, Allie, she has a box of desires, of everything she wants, of everything she hopes for in a relationship. Now imagine I have a relationship with God, right? And God has a box of desires, of things he wants for me and from me. And as I think about the way he cares about me, of how like there is nothing I can do to change how much he loves me, of the plans that he has for my life, of the promises that he's made to me, how he can take anything bad and use it for good. Like when I think about those things, in response, turn to him and ask, like, what's in your box? What can I do like for you? You know what he would say? You know what Jesus would say? What the Apostle Paul would say in the letter that he wrote? God would say, you want to know what's in my box? Her box. If you want to love me, love her. As I have loved you. He doesn't say, so you love me. He says, as I have loved you, so you love her. So you love him. So you love one another. Love that is seen is inspiring, but love that is felt is transforming.